Thank you all again for coming today. We're going to cover, again, updates from last week's session and anything that is new or continuing on for our ECP tech purposes. So our current most frequently asked questions that we are receiving right now is, number one, a reminder, the certificate of clearance is still required per the bylaws and per the submission. However, during the time that we were creating this new system, the feedback we were getting is that many individuals on campus, quite a few registrars and others, had created their own way of gathering student names for the certificate of clearance and getting the FERPA sign-off that they needed for their purposes. That was different from the certificate of clearance that we had created in the previous NAIA help. So we do have a PDF form that is available online that we can share with you. It is very cut that out. It's a very basic form of the certificate of clearance, given that it's just a PDF that you all have the ability to look at and edit if you wish. So we understand that it may not be as flexible as what was used to be at NAIA help. At the time, we don't have the ability to add the certificate of clearance in, but we'll keep that on the back burner, something that we can look to add a little bit later. But as of right now, certificate of clearance still required. If you have a system of doing this on campus that's better for your purposes, by all means, utilize that because it stays on campus. It's just the ability for us to make sure that we are getting student athletes to sign for FERPA purposes. And we can share our form as well if you need it. Next question that we're receiving quite a bit. Yes, the tech issue, and I think we'll have that in the PowerPoint slide a little bit later. The tech issue that is preventing schools from putting the first contest before the first date of class is still a restriction, is still a tech issue. The quickest workaround is, as you're building a brand new roster, to put the date of your first class to be way earlier than the date of your first competition. This ensures that your certificate can move through. If you are having issues with that, only really I think Legislative Services and IT can fix it. It's something very easy. If you call Morgan or myself on our hotline number, something very easy for us to go through and change the date of the first date of class. So that's something that we're still using as a workaround until we're able to get this corrected. It will for sure be corrected by the time we hit into the spring term. But as of right now, as we're trying to get through the first round of soccer scrimmages are happening right now, volleyball scrimmages are happening right now, and classes may not have started yet, you will need to put the date of your first class, quote unquote, basically the 1st of August to move a certificate forward. So we can help you with that as well. I'll go over this in a quick second, but just a reminder that ECP Quick Start Guide exists out there. And slides 27 and 29 will show you how to do a certificate export, but I will show you how to do that here in a second. And this is a new question that we're getting in the past couple of days. A lot of questions about deleting certificates. Right now, it's not something that we are completely comfortable doing, because if you think about it, so with this new system, every student athlete basically has a record assigned to them as they are moving into the system. They are on a roster. They basically get a record. They have their data added. It's a record. They're put on a certificate. It's added there. If we were just to go in and delete a certificate, as of right now, myself and our IT team, we're just not completely comfortable with how that will work, because it could cause issues with adding a student to a certificate again, because we're working through the nuances of this approach, and we can get to a point where we'll have some best practices on this. But if you're contacting us to delete a certificate, there's going to be quite a few steps that we'll have to go through before we feel comfortable deleting the certificate, even if we get there. But understand too, another way of a workaround on your end is that not all certificates need to be submitted. If you have just a kind of a dummy certificate out there just to get students added to a certificate to check some information, you can always remove bits of students from a certificate and work off a new certificate if needed. A certificate doesn't necessarily need to be deleted. So it's just not a very clear thing, a clear request for us to go through. We've had some interesting requests as far as like we're seeing some numerous students on certificates and things like that. So feel free to contact us because we don't want to diminish. There might be an actual tech issue where a certificate needs to be deleted. So we're happy to help with that. But it's not as simple as I'm just going to create a bunch of dummy certificates and then ask legislative services to delete them, because we're still going through that process and what that looks like, if that makes sense. So that would be my takeaway is let's work around some other ways of utilizing the certificate if possible, or just ignoring it altogether, adding students to a different certificate before we actually go through and delete. Okay, so this is just an example, a couple of things I wanted to show you on this example picture here. So first thing is the piece that I have circled in the red. So this is actually looking at students that have been built into a certificate. It has not been submitted yet. As you can see in the middle, the certificate has not been submitted for approval yet, so it's still in its working phase. You can go to the export portion of the certificate and then go to the right to where that download is listed and download this into an Excel spreadsheet. And that's where you can go and double check with your parties to make sure that everything that's on here is correct. If you need to make an edit to somebody's information at this point, you can click on the student's roster member number. That hyperlinks it directly into the student's profile. So you can click on this first student here. If you need to change from 1 term of attendance to 2, you can do that from this vantage point before you have clicked submit on the certificate. But at that point in time, when the certificate has been submitted for all 4 signers for the approval process, that is when the students has been locked on the certificate. So that's kind of going back to our old process, and the student is locked and you cannot go in for edits at the time of submitting for approval unless you were trying to go through, remove the student from their certificate and take those steps. But at this time, this is where you can export the certificate into an Excel file, double check the data. In this viewpoint, you can click on the RM number, the roster member number, and make edits to the student's profile if needed. Some troubleshooting questions that we are receiving. I know this probably seems very simple, but I can also understand when you're in the thick of things of creating certificates, getting things signed, and also being a new system, you might have some apprehension and some nervousness. So we understand that this might be a small thing, but it's overlooked. And so that's the first question is, I'm not seeing all the certificates that I've created. What happens now? Most likely you just need to change the view of the page from recently viewed, as you can see in the left-hand side, recently viewed, we only see 1 certificate, to view all, and then boom, all the certificates have shown up. So just remember each screen essentially has a default of recently viewed, unless you change it yourself and you can make it a default to view all. That's through that drop down. But if you are first and foremost worried that you're not seeing all the certificates, let's make sure that you have the view all piece. Next, if you're not receiving the email, best course of action right now is to simply log into the account to view the certificate, and it will prompt you immediately to approve or reject the certificate. So again, we're still working on the viewpoint. It's not mobile friendly as of right now. So if you're receiving the certificate on the phone and you want to click in and double check the certificate, it's going to be very difficult to view it on a mobile phone right now. So the best course of action is to make sure that you are reviewing any of the information on the laptop and approving it from that vantage point. You can still approve it from a mobile phone. That is fine, but it just might be, it will be very hard actually to view the actual information from a mobile view. So you can approve it on the mobile phone, but viewing it really needs to happen on a laptop prior to that. On rare occasions, we have seen issues with coaches and their permissions. We've seen this maybe once or twice. So if we're having issues where a coach just for whatever reason does not have the correct view, it could be part of number 3 as well. We've seen this rise up a couple of times now, that people are trying to get certificates submitted and they actually have 2 duplicate accounts. We are just as stumped as to how that's happened as the person is as well. So those kind of things we're having to work with ourselves and our IT guys to look through what has occurred with duplicate accounts and permission statuses. But the big takeaway on this is please start your process as soon as possible. We got a phone call. I got a phone call at 5:05 on Friday afternoon, and I had already logged out. So I understand there's going to be a lot of competitions coming up soon, a lot of competitions happening this week and this weekend. The sooner you can get this going and get those troubleshooting issues addressed now rather than 4:45 on a Friday afternoon, the better, because that will guarantee that all of us are together and we can work through this quickly and efficiently instead of having to try to troubleshoot things over the weekend. So unfortunately, right now, we do not have the luxury of troubleshooting a lot of things at 4:45 p.m., 5 o'clock p.m. on a Friday or over the weekend. We need everybody together. When we get a lot of these questions that we're working through, it's Morgan, myself, and the Scots in IT. We're working on all of this together to try to understand and find a solution and help troubleshoot. So I can't emphasize this enough. Get the information out there, your certificates out there early, and make sure that everything's submitted before your first competition so that any issues can be addressed throughout the week. Okay, so some of this stuff is going to be repeats from tech issues that are still ongoing. I've already mentioned this, that the contest date prior to the start date of class, we're still working around that. Contact us to change the start date of class. Students showing in PlayNAIA but not transferring to NAIAConnect. So as you see here, first and foremost, send the ECID of a student that you know is in PlayNAIA. You know they have an eligible decision, but they do not show up in one of these three buckets. And we'll talk about in the next slide here in a second. It's not showing up in the buckets. Don't try to create a profile from scratch. What that does is basically give a student a dummy ECID number. That's for when a student doesn't need an ECID decision from a emerging sport or a new school. That's really what that purpose is for, to when you create a new student from scratch, it's for that purpose of adding students that are being grandfathered in as a emerging sport or a new school that's added to the NAIA. So at this time, if you know the student went through PlayNAIA, has an eligible decision, but is not showing up in your search function, contact us with the ECID number. We will manually push that student through. It's a manual push. We're doing it the day of, sometimes within the couple of hours of being notified. But that's something that you email legislative services, give us a call with that student's number. We'll push it through the IT part of things, okay? So just a quick FAQ on how do the three buckets work. So you're having a hard time finding a student. Here are the steps to go through. Make sure that the student isn't already assigned to the roster. And just because now we're seeing so many people, coaches are creating rosters, registrars might be doing it as well. So different departments on campus might be adding students, and you're trying to search for one thinking you need to add it to the roster. They might already be there. So that's the number one thing that we're getting a lot of questions on and want to make sure we're okay. Check the assigned students section. Students who might play another sport at your institution might already appear there, especially if they're already going through the process of being on a roster, being certified. So check the assigned students box if you don't see it there. Again, check the shortlist section. That's where, when the migration happened, all of the students were dumped into the shortlist bucket. So not only are those students who are currently going through PlayNAIA, selected your school on the shortlist in PlayNAIA, all of those students got dumped into this one bucket for the very first time while you guys are certifying. And then after that, they should be shown on the assigned students section. If all else fails in 1 through 3, you can do a search in the unassigned box by the student's birth date, first name and last name. Again, don't try to create a brand new student until you've checked with legislative services. If that's the case, creating a brand new student, that doesn't need to be brand new. When that student's account, or basically their information, does get brought over, you're going to have duplicate students, and then we're having to look at, okay, what student was actually certified versus not, and the EC, was the decision correct or not? So some potential violations could stem from that. again, the on-hold aspect. So the on-hold aspect is still a work in progress. It is not working as we had intended it to be, meaning it's more than not, it's requesting that all information be added to the student's profile, or it will provide an error. And we're seeing this especially with students who are transfer students. So I've talked with a couple ADs about this today in their process of getting their student information together. There's some workarounds, possibly, putting all the students into the roster, adding in all the information, but don't click that the student is a transfer yet. So that way, at least you're able to add in all that information of terms of attendance, seasons of competition, and go from there and press save. And then you have a separate list of these transfers, meet with the transfers separately, and then you go back in and still edit the student's information. Thank you. So you can still edit the student's information prior to submitting them on a certificate. I know that's not the ideal way of doing things, and we definitely recognize that putting the student on hold, adding in information is going to be the ideal process way of doing things. But if you can kind of work around that for the time being, we are definitely have this on the list of things to try to find a resolution to. Again, a reminder about editing staff, adding staff. We continue to find some issues about this in our testing platform that we're using, and we're trying to put out other fires right now with it. So continue to email both Josh Bohr and Legislative Services, and we are connecting that way to get new coaches and new people added to, and if they need to be like a new role profile, like an ECP user added to a coach role profile, that is something that we're having to do currently. And unfortunately, we can't open that up to our athletics directors to make that adjustment at this time. Still working through that, still hope to have that resolved soon, but still at this point where we're at. Okay, a couple of things that showed up super quick last week and already we're hoping to be resolved. So you may not have even seen this yet, but we had a couple of schools who have submitted their certificates. And then when they went to go look at the PDF of that certificate that's been submitted and all 4 signers have signed, we saw that first of all, the term end date was not displaying on the PDF. It was displaying on the roster, but not the PDF. So we've resolved that, moved it forward. And the terms of attendance column was just showing as blank. And it was a simple fix of having basically tell the system to look at this one box, pull that information into the PDF. All the information was there. You saw it on the Excel piece that would export. Everything was correct in there. But if you were to go back to look at the PDF, it was showing as blank. So that piece has been resolved. However, the third piece here in the bottom right corner, if you look at the PDF right now, it's showing essentially yes for all students under the 48, 72-hour gen ed requirement. The correct application of this is still there in the back end, still there with the Excel export. It's still there in the student's profile correctly. It's just not showing correctly in the PDF output, if that makes sense. So just bear with us on that. We're looking to get this tested in our sandbox and move it forward. Okay, I just got a quick note from our IT guys. Some of these might be still in progress and testing. So I might have overstepped in saying that's resolved, but let's put quotations around resolved, right? Okay, possibly, maybe not.
They're in testing at the moment. They should be cleared and pushed into production shortly. We just need to verify that the fixes are actually working as intended.
We're going to think positive here, Scott. It's resolved. We'll put it out there.
I'm an IT. We don't think positive.
We're manifesting. Okay. Other things that have been resolved since prior to last week, the section of students showing as eligible on the roster when they don't have an EC decision yet, that has been fixed. And some other roster display issues have been fixed. I am going to go through this one piece though a little bit more thoroughly. So another thing that we have in testing right now is we saw some issues with students who are receiving an eligible decision for the 24-36-hour rule when in fact they did not meet the 24-36-hour rule. So first and foremost, please please double check your numbers as you're putting this information in. And I don't say that lightly. I know that especially those that are going through massive rosters right now, and you're in the mode of just adding in information, it may not come to mind as you're putting in, 12 and 11 hours that student's going to be ineligible for the 24-36-hour rule. So I don't say this lightly, but you do need to double check your math right now, because we've gotten some students brought forward that have been determined eligible when they in fact were not eligible because of the 24-36-hour rule error. We are working on this as well in testing. But it's just another good reminder, because we ran into other issues like this in the previous system. And when we're going through this, it's just a good reminder to share that we aim to create a text system that clearly identifies all ineligible student athletes. We certainly want to do that for you all, and we're aiming to do that. However, during this time, especially as we are building new information out and trying to create these processes, the institution still needs to be able to validate the information that they have, and as they're certifying student athletes, identify those athletes who are ineligible, because we cannot rely on we can't rely 110% on the tech. We're working on making 110% effective, but you all are going to have to, keep in mind the rules, keep in mind student athletes who might be ineligible, and try to use the sense of what you have with the process that we have in place. Okay, so this is still things that have been in progress for enhancement phases, next steps. This has been basically repeated each week. Certificates, I will be meeting with the eligibility chairs. If there's any eligibility chairs on the line right now, we are meeting tomorrow with our eligibility chairs so that they feel comfortable in the information that they are receiving as the eligibility chair, and how that will look for them. But the big thing is on this page, you'll still need to keep in mind certificates that have been submitted. All 4 signers have submitted. It will show when it's been submitted. It will show if it's been submitted after the first contest date. But the difference from last year's process to this year is that last year it would immediately show in red when a certificate has been submitted after the first contest. That's what we're working on to get done here. It just hasn't been completed yet. So again, keep an eye on that yourselves to make sure that certificates have been submitted in a timely fashion. And then we'll have to work with the eligibility chairs on identifying that, because they are the ones that typically notify us if an administrative error has happened. Another couple of things on this list that we are receiving still frequently asked questions and frequently asked requests is more of a better printable roster view with more information on it prior to creating a certificate, and an ineligible student athlete worksheet. So we have flagged that as requests and different things that we want to work around. I think through here, we've already mentioned a lot of these things. Again, a reminder of where the forms are at, certificate of clearance forms and so forth. The same process of how to look at this roster. Here, rules education updates, still about the same. The deadline for all members, regardless if you are a brand new member or a returning member, all rules education has now been pushed to October 1 due to the issues of getting everybody added into NAIAConnect. And there's a report on basically athletics directors who are responsible for checking the completion of rules ed can be done through reports. Look at reports, look at accounts with contact and learning plan. This will be for everybody. But if you have an assistant AD who is responsible for reporting to the athletics director who has completed the required trainings, they can access this as well. And it will show every person on your staff who has access and if they need to finish their training before October 1 or not. So we can also share that with you if sometimes it might be easier for me to do a screen recording and share it with you, or look at the reports together, but that's how you will access your reports. Okay, I think that's really it. I need to update this one. We are continuing to have weekly Zoom sessions. We have scheduled this out through middle of September, just in case we need to, but every Tuesday at noon Central, come back and join us for hopefully some issues any tech issues have been resolved, some best practices, anything else we need to identify and update, especially based off frequently asked questions or frequently asked requests for us to do new things. We will be addressing this every Tuesday for the next few weeks, noon Central. I will stop now. I know Morgan has been really busy here in the chat section. If you guys have questions, you can go through chat or ask the group here as well. Happy to help. Yeah, to build off of what Heather was asking, just the first one that I see at the bottom here is what Heather's looking at in this part is just doing what we used to call an addendum. So you can certify 18 players from a roster, submit that certificate, move it forward for approval. And then a couple of weeks later, you get 4 more players come in. You add those 4 players to the roster. They're on your home base of a roster. Then you can go in and say, I want to create a new certificate off of that roster. And the system should show you students that have already been certified. You could add 4 more players who have eligible on the roster but haven't been moved forward to certify. Add those together and move them forward as an addendum or another certificate. So one question or piece that's been asked is when a certificate has been submitted, approvers can't see the sport name or the due date, contest date, just the EC number. So Kevin, we'll look into that. There might be a view function. I'm going to take a screenshot of that question if I can.
I have it.
Okay, good. Thank you. We're going to take a look into that, Kevin, and get back to you. Like I said, it might be a tech issue, or we need to help others in how they view the certificate. And that's another thing too that goes to our future enhancement pieces and things that we've already flagged is the way that say a roster has its columns set up. And then if you change it to view certificate, the columns change a little bit here. It's something that does irk us personally quite a bit. So we feel your pain when you're wanting to have something and just have the same columns over and over again, but for whatever reason, you change a view and it changes to different ways. So we're going to make sure that that is eventually fixed. But yeah, as of right now, it might be a way that we're viewing it. And yeah, Jan, thank you. We've had this question a couple times as well, is when we are exporting the certificate to add in institutional IDs along with the other information. Now that we've heard a lot more from our registrars, that has been a key component in double checking student information. So we will get this on our list and continue to see what we can do about that. All right, anything else that we haven't had a chance to address? Let me know. Thank you guys. Thank you, Regan, and everybody for tuning in, and let us know if there's anything else. If you emailed us this morning and we haven't had a chance to get back to you, it's in progress, we promise. But thank you all so much. We'll talk to you soon.